infrastructure can mean a lot of things: bridges, tunnels, underground pipes, cables. In the case of Newtown Creek, one of the big infrastructure systems we deal with is wastewater management. In New York City, the wastewater system is operated by the New York City DEP, Department of Environmental Protection. They deliver fresh drinking water to our homes, and they also remove the wastewater that we send out into the system on a daily basis. If you're in Manhattan below 79th Street and you flush a toilet, it's heading ultimately to 13th Street and Avenue D on the Lower East Side, where you'll find the first bit of infrastructure connected to Newtown Creek. It's called the Manhattan Pump House, and it's where the DEP has centralized their pumping operations to move sewage and wastewater out of Manhattan. All of the material they process goes into an enormous tower called a surge tower, and you're looking down at it right now. That is Manhattan's flow. From the outside of the building, on the left side of the structure, you can see the surge tower as it appears from the street. The material collected is pumped under the East River in a tunnel. It is sent out to Greenpoint, Brooklyn, where it is headed toward the Newtown Creek Wastewater Treatment and Resource Recovery Facility. That is what the DEP is currently calling it. The plant has changed names multiple times in the last 10 years. I've come to just start calling it the Greenpoint plant. It's a technological marvel. The plant can handle 800 million gallons a day of Manhattan, parts of Brooklyn, and parts of Queens's wastewater flow. Unfortunately, the process that they use at the plant, which is biodigestion, that's what's happening in those large eggs, produces a tremendous amount of methane gas that they currently burn off. The DEP is working with the National Grid Company to try and come up with a way to set up a waste-to-energy program and harvest the methane. Entirely encased within the plant's walls is a tributary of Newtown Creek called Whale Creek. Whale Creek is where you'll encounter the DEP's sludge boats, which take the thickened wastewater off to another plant for treatment. On the north side of Newtown Creek, you encounter rail. The first rail yard you see is a passenger yard. It's in Hunters Point. It was established in 1870 when the Long Island Railroad first drove through the north side of Newtown Creek to Long Island City. They still use it for storing trains during the day, the Long Island Railroad does, and it is possible to catch a train there, but it is far more likely at the next stop on the line, which is the Hunters Point Avenue stop. The Hunters Point Avenue stop connects to the gargantuan Sunnyside Yards, which is nearby. Sunnyside Yards is owned and operated by Amtrak. Long Island Railroad runs its mainline track service through the Harold Interlocking at Sunnyside Yards. Sunnyside Yards also houses the trains of New Jersey Transit and Amtrak during the off-peak hours. Back along the creek, the lower Montauk branch tracks of the Long Island Railroad follow the shoreline of the creek. There's a small freight rail yard called the WHEELSPUR yard, which MTA has recently reactivated. It's used for freight and for storing freight cars in between runs by the Long Island Railroad's freight contractor, the New York and Atlantic Railway. The rail tracks cross the Dutch Kills tributary of Newtown Creek on the DB Cabin Rail Bridge. It's an early 20th century swing bridge, which is meant to be able to open and close, but doesn't. The bridge feeds tracks into the BLISSVILLE Freight Rail Yard, which is a small holding yard that's mainly used for, well, for building the garbage train. The garbage train is a controversial part of the waste management plan of the city of New York. There is a tremendous amount of waste flowing out of Queens in particular on a daily basis, but Brooklyn also contributes mightily. Right around the Greenpoint Avenue Bridge, you'll see two small roads that take you from Review Avenue down to Railroad Avenue. The Greenpoint Avenue Bridge carries a surprising amount of traffic, 13.5 million vehicle trips annually. The Department of Sanitation of New York is responsible for curbside collection of residential garbage. They also have a mission to handle recycling. Every single day, recycling trucks from all over Queens make their way to Railroad Avenue in Long Island City to go to the Sims Metal Management Queens Terminal. The way the system works is the truck drives in on a scale, the truck is weighed, the truck will enter the waste transfer station where it will tip out its load. When they are done unloading the collections, the truck will drive out on another scale. Whatever the differential is what New York City owes Sims for handling its sins. Workers at Sims will load the collections onto barges. The barges will then be picked up by tugboats. The tugboats will in turn take the barges to another Sims location for further processing and sorting. The cleanest, greenest way to move cargo around New York Harbor is using maritime. A single barge is the equivalent of 38 heavy trucks worth of cargo. Sims also handles disposing of cars and structural metal and metal from demolitions. There is an enormous market in recyclable metals. The last time I checked, the United States was exporting $64 billion a year of recycled metals to markets around the world. Sims Metal enjoys a 99-year lease. They're sitting on the New York City dock at Newtown Creek. Right across the water from Sims Metal is another recycling company, family-owned ALLOCCO Recycling. They do handle metals just like Sims, but ALLOCCO has another line where they handle soils. The soils from excavations and demolitions are brought in by truck. They're loaded into machines that sieve them by particle size, and then the material is loaded onto barges and it's taken off to be packaged as sand, gravel, or whatever particle size you encounter. Even some 3 miles back on Newtown Creek, you'll encounter maritime recycling businesses like Empire Metal Trading. Unfortunately, there are several waste transfer stations in both Brooklyn and Queens where commercial waste is brought in by truck and then carried out by truck. This is a really, really awful thing to have anywhere near you, and especially if you live on the route that those trucks have to take. Back in Queens on Railroad Avenue, the Department of Sanitation has dropped off their material and the material they collected, and they're going to be heading back out to do more collections. The Greenpoint Avenue Bridge is offered just for reference, so you can understand where we are. The Railroad Avenue west of the Greenpoint Avenue Bridge takes on an entirely different character. You see more of these boxcars that are being used for the garbage train. And these boxcars are being clustered around the Review Avenue facility of the Waste Management Corporation. Waste Management is a national level company that handles end-to-end garbage handling. They have a contract with New York City to handle its putrescent waste, or black bag garbage. The Waste Management facility on Review Avenue takes in 950 tons of garbage a day. Another form of infrastructure work that happens at Newtown Creek involves asphalt. The New York City Department of Transportation is always scratching away old road surfaces and repaving roads in New York City. There's a small access road on Review Avenue in the Blissville section of Long Island City. When you go down it, you encounter the Green Asphalt Company. which is in the business of recycling asphalt. We used to, as a society, put asphalt into landfills. Luckily, that's something we don't do anymore. Continuing eastward along the railroad tracks, we are still moving along the lower Montauk branch tracks of the Long Island Railroad. These tracks move in between factory buildings. The presence of a copper refinery in this area, known as Phelps Dodge, with the habit of its workers trying to dodge in front of oncoming locomotives, has given this area the nickname of Dead Man's Curve. This is also where the Berlin Railroad disaster occurred in the 19th century. The tracks continue to move east at grade. Unfortunately, there are very few businesses along these tracks that actually take advantage of their presence. There's an at-grade crossing called Haberman, which is a pretty impressive set of 4 tracks. Haberman leads ultimately onto a bridge and up to the Fresh Pond Yard, where the trains are able to switch over to another rail line called the Bushwick branch. There are a number of street crossings, and it's really hazardous duty for the train conductor and engineer to move along these streets. The ultimate destination of these tracks moves through Maspeth, then Ridgewood, then crosses the currently undefended border of Brooklyn and Queens into East Williamsburg, and passes by another waste management facility, the VARICK Street facility. The fence at VARICK Street opens up to allow the train to go onto the Montrose Avenue Railroad Bridge, which crosses the English Kills tributary of Newtown Creek. It then continues south into Brooklyn and continues on for about a half a mile. I should also mention that, in the midst of all this railroad and talk and all this wastewater treatment talk, I haven't mentioned a lot of the other infrastructure along Newtown Creek. So, Pulaski Bridge, first bridge you encounter. Long Island Railroad bridges act as a gateway to the Dutch Kills tributary. Borden Avenue Bridge, only retractile bridge on Newtown Creek. Long Island Expressway, 32 million vehicle trips a year over Dutch Kills, all of them heading into the Queens Midtown Tunnel. Next up is the Hunters Point Avenue Bridge, the brand new Kosciuszko Bridge over Newtown Creek, which carries the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. Then you've got the Grand Street Bridge, a swing bridge which is currently slated to be replaced. And then the Metropolitan Avenue Bridge, all the way back 3.1 miles from the East River. The DEP has installed an aeration system along Newtown Creek. The aeration system's goal is to oxygenate the waters which are being polluted with wastewater discharges from days when there is more flow than the sewer plant in Greenpoint can handle. The wastewater enters the Newtown Creek, which creates bacterial blooms, which starves the water of oxygen. The aeration system pumps air into the water, and it's hoped will increase the level of oxygen dissolved in the water column itself. In these photos, which were shot as long exposures at night, you can begin to get an idea of how much energy they're pumping into the water here. I can tell you that there is a dramatic issue with sound that's coming out of these pumping activities, and there's fears that the pumping of air through the water will release bacterial toxins into the air column.